I've been face to face with Suge with guns drawn,
right?
On both sides,
Yeah.
and I held my own, and from that day forward, it was nothing but respect with Suge.
Last but not least, my gangster from Compton, always in and out of jail and shit. The Bridges ain't had one friend left. Didn't know what call it the devil in the red dress. You gon' know.
I was running around with Suge and Eastwood and my homeboy Sonic for about 2 months, and I figured out this wasn't the place for me.
If you know anything about Suge Knight, you probably know he's one of the most infamous figures in the West Coast rap scene from the 90s. As the co-founder and former CEO of Death Row Records, Suge built a reputation for handling business in ways that were anything but traditional.
Everybody know one thing about me. I don't care any Hollywood, any on the streets, especially Hollywood rappers.
Whether it was sending death threats via text messages or crashing his car into a former associate, Suge had a way of getting his point across. At 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighing around 300 pounds, with a thick beard and ties to the mob Piru Bloods, Suge Knight had a serious presence. Most people in the gangster rap world were genuinely scared of him. He was like a real-life boogeyman in the music industry.
First time I met Suge Knight was at a restaurant in LA called Palm Restaurant. And I was sitting there eating, nice meal, and all of a sudden these huge guys who looked like a football team showed up. You know, it was very intimidating.
But despite Suge's fearsome rep, not everyone backed down from him. One name that stands out when it comes to those willing to face off with Suge is The Game. Besides being known for his music, The Game has had his fair share of beefs with some of the biggest names in the industry. That alone shows he's not the type to shy away from a confrontation, no matter who it is. And he definitely didn't flinch when he had a face-to-face encounter with Suge, one of the most feared men in hip-hop.
You know, he barked up the wrong tree with me because, you know, I'm from the west side of Compton, and I'm a blood, and I got my own and my own army, and we wasn't going for none of that death row shit.
In a 2019 interview with Nick Cannon on Power 106, The Game looked back on a moment he had with Suge after the 2004 Vibe Awards that earned him the rap mogul's respect. He said, "I've been face-to-face with Suge with guns drawn on both sides."
I've been face-to-face with Suge with guns drawn,
right?
On both sides.
According to The Game, after the Vibe Awards after party, Suge rolled up on him with around 60 gangsters deep, ready to press him for something he said in a song. The Game explained, "Suge wanted to press me for something I said in my song about him, which I said because I'm from Compton. I'm really from Compton. And I felt like Death Row Suge and that whole era took so many lives that didn't get mentioned in the city. A couple of those were friends and big homies. So I said a few things about Suge that he didn't like, and they rolled up on me."
Suge rolled up on me one time at the Vibe after the Vibe Awards after party with like 60 gangsters, and he wanted to press for something I said in my song about him. Death Row and Suge and that whole era took so many lives that didn't get mentioned, you know what I'm saying, in the city, and a couple of those was friends and big homies, and so I said a few things about Suge that he didn't like, and they rolled up on me.
The song The Game is talking about is a track called My B, where he took jabs at 50 Cent, Jay-Z, and Suge Knight, dedicating a verse to each of them. He didn't hold back when it came to Suge either. In the last verse, The Game went in, spitting lines like, "Last but not least, my gangsta B from Compton, always in and out of jail and ish. B tried to burn Snoop, stole Chronic from Doc, blew the whole West Coast, even tried to F-pack. Type of B to stand on Beverly Hills. Word on the street, she got a few real N killed. I look up now she on my D, telling me how she always gonna be my B."
Last but not least, my gangster from Compton, always in and out of jail and shit.
He continued throwing shade, rapping about Suge always showing up to award shows, following him around and doing dumb stuff, despite supposedly being smart and even having a college degree. The Game also mentioned how Suge burned a lot of bridges, ending up without any friends. He finished the verse with some hard-hitting lines. "No prenup, one N got stuck with her, I was smart, knew always not to F with her, what goes around comes around, scandalous-ish, somebody tried to kill that B, burn the bridges and ain't had one friend left, and that know her called her the devil in that red dress."
The Bridges ain't had one friend left. Didn't know what call it the devil in the red dress. You gon' know.
At just 25 years old, The Game wasn't about to let Suge Knight and his massive crew intimidate him. He straight up refused to back down. "I drew my gun on all of them and I held my own." From that day forward, it was nothing but respect from Suge, the game said, reflecting on the intense face-off.
And I held my own. And from that day forward, it was nothing but respect with Suge.
Despite all the tension, he didn't let it end there. He made it clear that throwing jabs was just part of who he was. I throw jabs sometimes, mainly because I can. And everybody knows I'm an asshole sometimes, so that's just what I do. But over time, as he talked to Suge while he was behind bars, the game started to notice that Suge had begun to see life differently. I talked to Suge from the inside, and he's got a different perspective on life now, which he should. I mean, where else do you go after being how you used to be? Suge's got to be 50 plus now.
And everybody know that, I'm an asshole sometimes, so that's what I do. But I talked to Suge from the inside. He does have a different perspective on life, and he should have a different perspective on life. I mean, go from here with, being, how you used to be. Like, Suge's got to be 50. You know what I'm saying? 50 plus.
The beef was pretty much squashed after that confrontation. The game even gave props to Suge for the impact he had on the rap game. You can't take away what he gave. The Tupac albums, the Snoop albums, the whole Death Row era. That was legendary.
We can't take away what he did give. You know what I'm saying? The Pac albums, the Snoop albums, the whole Death Row.
Death Row, just the movement.
Man,
a black man owning.
That
Masters,
was huge,
his
man.
company.
But what a lot of people don't know is that before all this tension, the game actually had a history with Suge. At one point, he was almost signed to Death Row Records. In a recent interview with Vlad TV, the game opened up about his time hanging around Suge and the Death Row crew. He was rolling with Suge, Eastwood, Crooked One, and a few others for a couple of months. He was in those circles, seeing how things worked behind the scenes. But in the end, the game decided that Death Row wasn't the right move for him. He saw how competitive the West Coast rap scene was and knew he needed to be somewhere he truly belonged, somewhere he could shine. I felt like I belonged on records, he explained.
I was running around with Suge and Eastwood and my homeboy Sonic for about 2 months, and I figured out this wasn't the place for me. West Coast, young West Coast back then. So we went to the studio a few times, and I watched Crooked I do his thing, some I watched Eastwood do his thing and kill some shit, but I just felt like I belonged on records.
Death Row just wasn't the place for him anymore, especially since the label wasn't the powerhouse it used to be. By that time, Tupac had already passed away, and Snoop Dogg, along with other big artists, had moved on to different things. The game recognized that Death Row was a shell of its former self. Eventually, he got linked up with Diddy, who made a smart move and pushed the game over to Dr. Dre. And as we all know, that's when things really took off for him.
And then I started running with Diddy a little bit, and then Diddy, sort of pushed me over to Dre once Dre was ready to sign me, and then, that's where things went.
But the game wasn't the only one who had the guts to stand up to Suge Knight. Eminem did too.
Respected Eminem, 50, and that was with us. So Suge came, he had some Mexican. Now we from New York. You ain't never seen a nigga with a tattoo on his forehead. I knew Eminem was real. He's like, don't give a man. This is when I knew. I'm like, damn, Eminem is a real 50 outside, what's up?
See, the thing is, Dr. Dre decided to part ways with Death Row Records. Dre wasn't vibing with the label's aggressive image or the folks hanging around it. Plus, he was totally over the East Coast-West Coast beef that was dominating the scene at the time. His focus was purely on making music, which is why he left Death Row to set up his own label, Aftermath Records.
It was mostly just the way the studio was, and that's where I have to spend most of my time. This East Coast, West Coast nonsense is just getting ridiculous, It's just like another form of black-on-black crime.
The start was a bit slow for Aftermath, but everything changed when Dre made a pivotal move on March 9th, 1998. He signed Eminem, a rapper from Detroit who was about to shake up the whole music industry. Eminem wasn't just another artist. He turned out to be a game changer, selling records like hotcakes and catapulting Aftermath to massive success throughout the 2000s. Now, this didn't sit well with Suge Knight at all. Death Row was having a rough time. They'd lost Tupac, a major force behind their success, to a tragic murder, and the label was spiraling down. Seeing Eminem's meteoric rise under Dre's label probably felt like a slap in the face to Suge. He thought someone as influential as Eminem should have been part of Death Row's roster, not thriving under Dre's new venture. Suge, ever the intimidator, decided he'd try to instill fear in Eminem to perhaps sway him or shake his resolve. But Eminem was no ordinary guy. He was gutsy, a bit wild, and he had this alter ego, Slim Shady. Slim Shady is this crazy, often violent, pill-popping character Eminem brought to life in his lyrics, a persona that didn't bow down to anyone, not even to someone as feared as Suge Knight. The 2001 Source Awards was a pivotal moment for Eminem, where he first really felt the heat from Suge Knight. Eminem was there performing with his group, D12, and typically at these award shows, artists can have their bodyguards nearby. But this time, the rules were different. Bodyguards had to sit separately from the artists, which left Eminem unusually vulnerable. During the event, according to Eminem's former bodyguard, Big Naz, Eminem found himself in a pretty tight spot. He ended up being surrounded by a bunch of tough-looking guys sporting red shirts, a clear marker of the Bloods gang, which Suge and his crew were affiliated with. It was clear that Eminem was in a precarious situation.
M was walking to his seat, I'm standing off to the side, and M was cut off on his way to his seat, and all these guys in red shirts surrounded him. And I'm looking at M's face, and I'm looking at these guys, I'm like, something ain't right.
Big Naz had to sprint over to where Eminem was to get him out of there before anything bad happened. He mentioned that these guys were sent by Suge Knight himself, which just goes to show the extent of the bad blood stemming from the ongoing feud between Suge and Dr. Dre, a feud Eminem had unwittingly inherited as Dre's protege.
He said, death row, this death row about, this death row life. I was like, death row, what does it got to do with him? He said, hey man, Suge sent him a message.
After Eminem presented an award to DMX, Big Naz managed to escort him safely out of the building. But that incident at the Source Awards was just the beginning of Suge's attempts to intimidate Eminem. Interestingly enough, despite all this aggression, Suge claimed publicly that Eminem's music meant nothing to him, yet his actions seemed to tell a different story.
Think of Eminem, is that what do you think of white rap?
You really from the ghetto,
no.
And you really doing those things you rapping about, you talking about, I can respect that.
Right.
If somebody else writing your rhymes, somebody else, is you telling somebody else's story, that really don't mean nothing to me.
The tensions escalated even further during a later incident in Hawaii. According to Big Naz, there was credible information that Suge planned to harm Eminem during a specific event. This wasn't just a small threat either. It was alleged that Suge sent over 50 of his guys all the way from Los Angeles to Hawaii just to disrupt a casual gathering that included Eminem, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre. The whole atmosphere of what was supposed to be a relaxed getaway flipped completely. Suddenly, everyone was on high alert. The group, including their wives, found themselves donning bulletproof vests and packing firearms, hardly the standard gear for a holiday. Even the Honolulu police were brought in, with officers assigned to shadow Eminem and the rest of the group for the duration of their stay to ensure their safety. He said, "Yeah, it was supposed to be a vacation, but it wasn't. We all had our wives, some people had their kids with them. We thought it was a vacation, but it ended up being a effing problem. When we got off the plane, we ended up escorted by Honolulu policemen and we had to gather up our kids, our wives, and had to be rushed to the transport van." The situation in Hawaii required swift and decisive action from Big Naz and the rest of the security team. Given the looming threat from Suge Knight, they had to quickly gear up for any possible confrontation, which meant putting on bulletproof vests as a necessary precaution. The seriousness of the threat was such that Interscope Records had to foot the bill for additional security measures, including hiring an officer from the Honolulu Police Department to provide extra protection. This was largely because Suge's influence was so pervasive that taking extra steps to ensure safety was absolutely essential. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and we'll catch you in the next video.